Hamas has this approach of they want everyone dead. They're wanting Jews gone. For the Israelis, they're not looking to eliminate their surrounding neighbors. They truly want to have peace and live at peace.
Israel goes to great steps, and you know that firsthand, great lengths to protect civilian population because it's a culture of life, not a culture of death.
Definitely, and I think that the question of morality today is very important. What do you base your morality on? On the Bible? You base it on your subjective morality? Well, morality should be the same.
What is Israel's approach now to address the current situation? Obviously, we've heard different things in the news lately. Is Netanyahu looking to take over Gaza? Who's going to lead Gaza? The big question, what's next? What's happening?
Probably there'll be an intermediary that will govern Gaza. Probably someone who is politically not popular in the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which is the organization that is what we call today the Palestinian Authorities, or from Hamas.
Welcome to this episode of Zion's Wire, the official podcast of Zion's Hope, where we bring you prophetic insights and biblical discussions with a passion for God, His people, and His plan for planet Earth. I'm Christopher Diaz, and I'm joined today by David Rosenthal.
Hey, Chris.
And a great friend of ours, Josh, a ministry team member from Jerusalem, Israel.
Great to be with you.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you for having
excited.
me.
Good to have you with us.
Yeah, great to
Good
have
to
you
be
with
together.
us. So you've been through a whole lot, and so we're going to touch on quite a bit of what you've experienced and what you've seen in Israel, as well as what's going on. I know our audience is eager to hear about the current state of events. We've been talking quite a bit about what has transpired during the war, or the recent war, I should say, and what has been transpiring weekly since, because there's been so much movement worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just over there with you, Josh, and with a team and ministering over in the Holy Land. And what an amazing time we had. And little did we know that when we traveled home, we had just gotten out about 13 hours before Israel launched its attack against Iran's nuclear sites. And really that just changed everything, the whole dynamic.
Good timing.
Yeah, we did. We felt like we had good timing. But I think it was bittersweet for us.
Yeah.
I mean, we felt responsible for the team that we had there. We wanted to make sure they got home safely. But I think we also felt that so much the connection of wanting to be there during Israel's difficult time. But we were on our way home, and when we landed, we really found out, what had begun for what is President Trump's been calling a 12-day war over with Israel and Iran. So what was it like, and how was it different for the Israelis from what you'd been experiencing the previous really almost 2 years as a result of the massacre perpetrated by Hamas from Gaza?
Well, that's a very good question. And we've been in this war almost 2 years in October. And as time progresses, we started just getting used to the fact that we're in a war. We had the border of Gaza, we had the Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and people got used to the new situation. And as we started just getting used to it, it started to have a new front, and that's with Iran. And the 12-day war was actually a bit different because till then people moved, and those from the border of Gaza moved to other places around the country, those from the north Lebanon border to other places around the country. And from there, what happened was that suddenly it's real for the whole country as a whole, danger for the whole nation. It became a bit more real for a lot more of the population, like Jerusalem, who people pray for the peace of Jerusalem, was peaceful considering the situation. But then this missile attack from Iran actually affected everyone and every aspect of their lives, in the fact that everyone stopped school. All the schools were not working. It was too dangerous to take the kids to school. And we were basically waiting from siren to siren. waking up at 4 in the morning, getting ready. Thank God we have the pre-warning siren, a warning alert, which basically tells us you have 10 minutes to get ready, and 10 minutes there'll be an alarm because of the distance to Iran was so great. We have time.
As opposed to, for instance, when rockets are coming in from Gaza, previous to that, or from Hezbollah in Lebanon, the distances are much closer, right on Israel's borders.
Yeah.
But the type of rocket, it was very different.
Very different and much more scary this time. When you look at places like Bat Yam, and they just put on new high-rises and multi-home buildings, and suddenly those whole new buildings were practically destroyed.
And this is a suburb of Tel Aviv, just to the south, right on the Mediterranean coast, not that far from Gaza.
Yeah, very close.
Yeah.
But the missiles were the ones from Iran, and they significantly brought a destruction level that was not seen previously and was significantly more scary than before.
It makes me think back because not only were we there in June, but David, you and I were there just in last November.
Right.
And during that time, even when alarms would go off, we saw a very different environment of, if you were in central Israel, it's like, okay, that's happening on the north side of Israel, or that's over on the Gaza border. And there was a sense of, okay, we're okay here. Mm-hmm. But listening to some of the things I've heard you say, even outside of the podcast, this was everybody is taking shelter. Everybody is moving quickly. And you understood that this is a whole different enemy, if you will, or a different weapon.
Yeah, and the Iranian missiles coming over, I mean, they could take out really entire city blocks, as opposed to the rockets, which obviously can do a lot of damage, coming in from Hamas and Hezbollah, are smaller and don't do have the degree of damage that a missile coming in from Iran would have.
Yeah, definitely. But also, I'll tell you the other side of things is that the Israelis and the Jewish people are very resilient and not going to give up very easily.
Right.
And as this happens, you had weddings taking place in underground parking lots, which became the shelters of some buildings. You had people coming together and celebrating Shabbat. You had people just taking care of each other in such a way that we just can't explain. It's just so deep and so rooted in the fact that everyone are united together as Israelis, as Jewish people, as a nation, to come together to protect each other, defend each other, and just we're here to sustain our nation. We're not going anywhere, and we want to build for the future. And really that feeling is just something quite amazing to see the beauty of that unity in that time.
That is amazing. That actually makes me remember something you shared with our staff yesterday. And we touched on this in a previous episode of, Hamas has this approach of they want everyone dead. They're wanting Jews gone. We talked about from the river to the sea recently and what that means. But then for the Israelis, they're not looking to eliminate their surrounding neighbors. They truly want to have peace and live at peace with their neighbors. You had shared even rescuing animals. You guys share a little bit about kind of that train of thought.
Well, I've met a few people, and they asked them. I had a dog, and I took her out for a walk. And as I meet people, it's like, "Oh, you have a nice dog." I was like, "Yeah, we rescued them from Gaza. They were this thin. They didn't eat." And the soldiers, the Israeli reservists, and the soldiers just have this heart for animals. And I heard them saving even donkeys from Gaza, bringing them out, feeding them, helping them grow, nurturing back to health. And really this love for animals and life is embedded within the Jewish people, within the very aspect of everything in the daily life of the Israelis and Jewish people. And that's very important to understand about our people.
And you can very easily extrapolate from that all the talk that's in the international news media of Israel attempting to starve the Gazans, the Palestinians that are there, it's utter nonsense.
Yeah.
It's absolute nonsense. Israel has a deep respect for human life, for all life, and they take more precautions and do more with their military than almost any other military in the world in trying to preserve human life, even the human life of their enemies. by dropping leaflets, by making hundreds of thousands of cell calls to let the population there know that there is a terrorist in your neighborhood or in your building. Get out, because we're going to take out that terrorist, to give advanced warning to the population, the civilian population, to move out of harm's way.
Yeah.
Israel goes to great steps, and you know that firsthand, great lengths to protect civilian population, because it's a culture of life, not a culture of death.
Definitely. And I think that the question of morality today is very important. What do you base your morality on? On the Bible? You base it on your subjective morality? Well, morality should be the same. And humanity seems to shift and decide what morality they choose. That's why today Israel could be the bad guy and others could be the good guys, because it's not about really who is right and wrong in the war. It's about who has the better PR of the war. And that's basically Israel. You have, 6.5 million Jewish people in Israel. And around the world, you have almost 2 billion Muslims. And not to say that all Muslims are part of this, but just really to understand, Israel's a minority in all aspects and always has been.
Both population and geography.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that leads to the issue, of propaganda. We've talked, Chris, about so much propaganda that is being put out there. And it just seems like the international media is just lapping it up and utilizing it.
What do you see, Josh, there in Israel in terms of that propaganda? Because our media, we're seeing posters of starving children and aid supposedly sitting and waiting, but then sometimes I'll see images from IDF and it's already past the border. They're waiting for it to be delivered. What are you seeing there?
Well, there are many things happening now in the land. One of the things is that many trucks are going in, and people are asking, why are trucks going in when our hostages, 20 hostages, still at this time alive in Gaza, starving to death, but they're receiving aid? And so this is a legitimate question. No one would think in the Second World War to give aid to the Nazi forces, who were the enemies of the United States and the Western world, and say, yeah, let's give them food while we're bombing Dresden, which was the most beautiful city going architecturally, and was just flattened. And many people, sadly, that was the price of war. And no one would think that they would give them food and help and shelter. Only after the war, America came in and started rebuilding. And today, what's the most powerful country in Europe? It's Germany. Because of the change, the transition. That's what Israelis hope that will happen in Gaza after the war. That there'll be a change, a transition from the ideology and the indoctrination that has corrupted the children's minds and the minds of the people, thinking that Israel is this evil thing. Well, Israel's actually the one that's probably doing more for them than their own government in Gaza of Hamas. So we have to...
The people are trapped really in a Hamas system from birth till death.
Yeah.
Indoctrinated. I mean, amazing, just mind-boggling to see how they're indoctrinating children in the Hamas-run schools.
Yeah.
And how they are... I mean, we've seen the videos. We've seen the classes that they're teaching and the translation of the things that they're teaching the children about how to hate Jews.
Exactly. But that's not only in the West Bank, in the Hamas in Gaza, that's also in the West Bank, that's also in certain places in East Jerusalem and other places. The main thing is that history is being rewritten. Even if you look at how they try to teach history, in Gaza they would take you a coin that says that in Palestine. And that time, British mandate, it's called Palestine. But what they don't put on the picture is that it says Palestina in Hebrew, and then it says in prefaces, it says Aleph Yud, which means Eretz Israel, which means the land of Israel. So they already acknowledged, the Jewish people, and the coins that were there at the time acknowledged that it's called Palestine and the land of Israel in the same time, which means to you that they're taking history and wiping it from the books, and people don't even know that's true because they think it's probably an AI-generated picture, or that Israel is doing the propaganda, when actually Hamas are the ones doing propaganda. By the way, this morning, and I looked at an article in one of the Hebrew news channels, and it actually had used the kind of children's video to teaching and educating them, but they actually what they do, they educate them for hating Jews. And this is significant because it starts from when you're young, from the camps, you know, you have your Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, right? You have some sort of youth groups, and in there but they teach them about hating Jews. The Jews are the enemy. The Jews are the worst of creatures, and other like themes that are just so bad.
Yeah.
And then people don't understand why these themes are used in Europe and other places, and people have to be careful. We got to remember these things are evil, and you have to fight this evil, because this evil, you think this evil doesn't affect you, but it will affect you and your homes and your families at one point in time. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you have to be careful.
And we've said before that, you know, when you hear these chants, these anti-Israel chants on college campuses and it really spewed around the world of, you know, from the river to the sea. And of course, they mean the river, meaning the Jordan River, which is Israel's eastern border currently, and to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. Palestine, they say, will be free. Well, what they mean is free of Jews.
Exactly.
And to expel the Jews completely. I mean, if you want to talk about genocide, that's a chant for genocide, if I've ever heard one. People don't realize, and many do, but some who are chanting these things don't even realize what they're saying. And the other thing that really struck me when I watched some of the propaganda and some of the things that they're teaching, that Hamas is teaching in their schools in Gaza to their young children, is the focus on Al-Aqsa. The Al-Aqsa mosque. You want to talk a little bit about Al-Aqsa and why they have such a focus on the Al-Aqsa mosque and why it's so significant in the thinking of Muslims?
Wow, that is a very good question, and that goes back to Sheikh Amin al-Husseini in the British Mandate time, where the way to cause people to uprise against the rising population of Jewish people was to call for the defense of Al-Aqsa. And it's not that the Al-Aqsa is not sacred to Muslims. No one's saying that. We agree that Muslims see it as a sacred place.
We're talking about the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
Exactly. It's
not the Golden Dome structure, just for our audience to be sure. Not the Dome of the Rock or that Golden Dome structure, but the gray domed mosque that is also atop the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
Yes. So the whole place is called Haram al-Sharif, which is basically like this sacred place or consecrated place. And it's always been, since Islam, it's been holy to Islam. And Jewish people acknowledge that. There's no propaganda saying it's not Muslim, so Jewish people can do something on Temple Mount. No. It's that Jewish people say we have history there too. And in the 19th century, Abdulaziz II, the Sultan, actually commissioned a guy called Conrad Sheikh to build a model of the Temple Mount. And what Temple Mount, he basically called it the first and second temple, where the first and second temple is, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And what this means is that a sultan that is Muslim acknowledges and doesn't even mind to say, it's a place where Jewish people had a temple.
So it's
twice.
Historically predating, and it's saying that Jewish people have a historical connection to this Temple Mount location.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's another thing, and what people don't understand is that in Arabic, they use the word Beit al-Muqaddas, which actually in Hebrew would be Beit HaMikdash, which means the house of the temple or holy temple.
Wow, interesting.
And so they actually use this term in Arabic, but they don't think about what it means. And so this is significant to understanding the history. Muslims should not be afraid to say the word temples there, because it's part of history. When you embrace history, you embrace reality. And so no one is, when you're not afraid of the history, then you can be right. That's the point. If you're trying to change history, what does that mean? It means you're afraid of truth. Mm-hmm. And Muslims should not be afraid of truth, like Jews should not be afraid of truth. History is history.
So why would Hamas, in its massacre coming across into Israel and killing and raping and taking hostages back, why would they call that campaign the Al-Aqsa Flood?
Well, because first of all, they want to connect their struggle in Gaza to Al-Aqsa. They want to connect their victory in Gaza with Jerusalem. They want to show that they are the ones uprising and bringing in the things to come, which is what they perceive in the manifesto of Hamas, which there's a perception that when they go into, in the end of days, they will be persecuting the Jews, and even the rocks and the trees will cry out. The rocks behind them will say, "Here is a Jew, come and get him," and the trees will say, "Here is a Jew, come and get them." And basically, this perception is that if they call it the Al-Aqsa Mosque, then all the Islamic nations will come and rise up. All the Arabs, Muslims in the West Bank will rise up
to join their cause
and flood Al-Aqsa. That's the point. Flooding Al-Aqsa is not just from Gaza, but from different places, from all over the Muslim world. And that's what they were trying to accomplish, to rise up the Arab world, to bring them, to join them, and basically overcome Israel. And that actually did not happen. So,
yeah, so bring us then to some of the current events happening. We've definitely been diving into that, and knowing what you've shared with us. What is Israel's approach now to address the current situation? Obviously, we've heard different things in the news lately. Is Netanyahu looking to take over Gaza? Who's going to lead Gaza? The big question, what's next? What's happening?
That's a very good question. I don't know if I have a full answer. I can just speculate and say probably there'll be an intermediary that will govern Gaza. Probably someone who is politically not popular in the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which is the organization that is what we call today the Palestinian Authorities, or from Hamas. So if they're not popular in both places, they'll probably be in the middle and probably be able to have some sort of foothold and governorship in Gaza with an Arab force, with a sort of small army or small kind of military and government in Gaza.
So to clarify, you're saying that Israel would lean towards that? They would want to see that?
Yeah, this is something that I just read 2 days ago on the news, so a few days ago, and this is kind of where it's leading, because no one wants Hamas to rule in Gaza. No one wants the PLO to rule in Gaza. Both of them, in reality, don't like Israel. If you see what happens in the world, they are trying to do as many things as possible to go against Israel. And so Israel doesn't want to work with both of them. He wants something in the middle, something neutral. Will that work for Israel's advantage? I hope so, but will it? We're not sure. We'll have to see the test of time, what will happen in the Gaza Strip and just around in the region from the situation.
Yeah, I think this actually aligns. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I think that aligns a lot with what you've been talking about with the Abrahamic Accords, with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and I mean they've come together and condemned Hamas. So,
yeah, which is shocking.
Yeah.
Finally, it took them a while to come around, but the Arab League finally came out not that long ago to condemn Hamas, to condemn the massacre, and called for Hamas to lay down its arms, which is a big start, a good start. But of course, they want to tie that whole condemnation of Hamas to Israel needing to create a pathway for a Palestinian state. And there are many who've been watching and observing all these things and say, look, you're rewarding Hamas. I mean, if you're saying, well, out of this whole 2-year ordeal that was precipitated by Hamas's massacre against Israel, and then after 2 years, and now the nations of the world, the European countries, Canada, UK, and so many others are calling for a Palestinian state, saying we're going to recognize a Palestinian state in September, which is basically rewarding Hamas for what they perpetrated 2 years ago against Israel. It's shocking to even hear the nations coming out and saying those things. I want to back up just for a minute, just for our audience, because I think sometimes some of these names and places get a little muddy for people. When we talk about Hamas, we're talking, at least historically, primarily in the Gaza Strip, that narrow strip of land south of Tel Aviv along the Mediterranean coast, where Hamas really was strong and ruling and governing over the people there, and one of the most densely populated strips of land on earth. And then you have, when we say the West Bank, can you just define briefly the area in general terms of the West Bank, and what was the Palestinian ruling authority there? You mentioned it just a couple minutes ago. And how do those factions, those Palestinian ruling factions, how have they got along historically? What do the people think, the Palestinians who live in these two different areas, about these ruling factions? And then move into back to what you were saying about, okay, now how do we find a suitable government to, once this war ends, for the people of Gaza?
That's very good. Good questions, and very important questions, because history would show us where we are, where we were, and where we are, and where we will be. The PLO started in 1964 by Yasser Arafat. Actually, it was a KGB plot to kind of be a thorn in the flesh to Israel, because Israel in 1948, the USSR believed that they would be communistic or lean towards communism, so they supported Israel. And so, since Israel did not become fully communist, and they supported the West and America and the United States, they ended up doing this project, this 64. And this is very significant, because this is before what we call the West Bank was part of Israel, before the 6-Day War, 1967. Why is that significant? Is because it wasn't about Israel in the West Bank. It wasn't about Israel in Gaza. Israel wasn't there before 1967. So, but still you had the fractions like PLO who wanted to fight against Israel, and that was their goal.
And historically, the PLO, or the Palestine Liberation Organization, was connected to, in people's minds who go back there, to Yasser Arafat, who was the leader of the PLO during those years.
Exactly. And so one of the things was, as well, the propaganda that was brought forth, that Yasser Arafat was a Palestinian, and that he was originally from the land, but when he was not. And this is significant, because what happens next is that within the West Bank, after 67, Israel takes over 2/3 more territory than it had before. The Golan Heights, the West Bank, and Gaza, and Sinai Peninsula. Now, the Golan Heights from Syria was significant for its defense and for the long-term sustainability of the state of Israel.
And that's to a mountain range to the northeast of the Sea of Galilee.
Exactly. And so the West Bank is what we call historical Judea Samaria. So what is the West Bank? It's the West Bank of the Jordan River. It's territory that belonged from 1948 to 1967 to the Jordan, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, of King Hussein. And so King Hussein was told not to join the war in 67. And he still entered the war. That's why we had the fighting between Israel and Jordan.
So the surrounding Arab nations were putting pressure on Jordan to join them in their attack against Israel.
Exactly. And this is significant, because then Israel had to fight against a party which they didn't want to fight, and they gained all the West Bank. Now, remember, the West Bank that we call today was originally part of the Kingdom of Israel in the time of King David and Solomon and the kings that after there was a split, but basically it's part of the historical homeland of the Jewish people. And so Samaria and Judea is very much from the Jezreel Valley. It's from Haifa, stretches from Haifa to Jordan, and the Jezreel Valley all the way down towards Hebron.
So kind of cutting across that valley, cutting across north central Israel.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you imagine it, or if you see a topographical map, it's actually all the hills of that region.
So that's the northern part of the West Bank.
Yeah.
Is the area of the Jezreel Valley.
Yeah.
Right, in Israel, and on the western side of the Jordan River, and then it moves south.
So yeah, to the east is the Jordan River, and to the west would be the coastline of Israel, which is just less than a few miles, less than 15 miles away, and it's so short that you can get there in a car drive, and from the river to the sea. So from the river, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean, it's not so far away. It's a very small country, and we mentioned this that it's the size of New Jersey. If you compare them.
So part of that narrow land of Israel, you have on the West Bank, that means the western side of the Jordan River, you have another area called the West Bank, which takes up part of Israel's narrow land area.
Yep.
So it with the Palestinians there, and we talk about there's a lot of call for going back to those pre-1967 borders, where basically the Palestinians would have the entire what is the so-called West Bank. If that happened, Israel would become essentially indefensible because you have this very narrow strip of land that Israel would have in certain portions of its country between the West Bank, where the Palestinians are, and the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah. So when Israel gave back the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt for peace, which was a really amazing deal for Egypt because there's oil there, there's beautiful landscape, historical landscapes, economical advantages like the Suez Canal. And so when this happened, basically the question was, who's going to take Gaza? What are we going to do with Gaza? And so actually Israel kind of took the area region of Gaza. Egypt didn't want to take it. And this was one of the probably where a lot of this conflict with Gaza started. Now, you asked me about Hamas. Hamas started in around 1988, and when they started in like places like the West Bank, maybe some in Gaza, but most of them were in the West Bank. And they grew and they grew because they were helping with people with their needs, like their basic needs, like food and money and different needs of families. So they originally were a social humanitarian help for people. And people started loving them and liking them because they were very clear what they believe, and they were very much helpful for people. In a very short time, they became a very strong political movement opposing the PLO, and still they're in Gaza and West Bank, but from a minority they became now a majority. The people who support them after the 7th of October. We see that there's 70% of Palestinians in the West Bank, not in Gaza. Gaza, they ruled Gaza, in the West Bank who support the Hamas to rule over them. Why is that? Is because they see what they did in 7th of October as a success. And they see it as that they are legitimate rulers, and they actually have power. And they do what they say they're going to do, and they were able to overcome a great border, a great, a virtual wall, you can say, that they couldn't believe that they could pass, and they have passed it, and they were overcoming it. But the thing is, even though they have the majority in the West Bank, what they did on the 7th of October shows also their intentions, and there always has been their intentions. So now Israel is in a problem. We have now in the West Bank, which is basically all our major cities. It's close to Haifa, it's close to Tel Aviv, it's close to other locations, Jerusalem, and Hebron area with all the South Judean hills. So all that area, there are many of the people who support Hamas. And that is very sad, because that means that they would, if there was elections today, Hamas would win.
So the Palestinian people, not just the Palestinians living in Gaza, but the Palestinian 70% you're saying living in the West Bank, which is ancient Judea, Samaria, bordering Israel's major cities or close to Israel's major cities, 70% of them see Hamas as a bastion and leaders of resistance against Israel and would support them, you believe, in an election.
Yes. Wow. And that's why they're prohibited from making an election. Because in 2006, Israel went out of Gaza. So there was the place called Gush Katif. There were Jewish homes, Jewish cemeteries, Jewish businesses, agriculture. They left 2006. That was orchestrated by Ariel Sharon. Then he was the prime minister, and left and said, you know what? Gaza is Gaza's problem. So they closed off the border, said, okay, you want to leave Gaza? Go through Egypt. That's kind of what they were saying. And since a lot of the infrastructure of Hamas in Gaza was smuggling under the radar, under the border, bringing in all sorts of things, materials, all sorts of even cars, people, whatever they wanted, they brought through the border of Egypt. Israel left them alone into their own area. So who controlled the entrance to Gaza? Egypt. They had the exclusive ability to allow people to go through and out of
both
Gaza.
above ground and in tunnels underground.
tunnels, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, you said a lot there, and I'm going back to something you said, that Hamas did not get along with the PLO.
Yep.
And the PLO is now the Palestinian Authority. So what's the current relationship then between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority? Is it still the same that it was, or has that adjusted? Because if 70% of the West Bank is pro-Hamas, what does that look like?
That is a very good question, and that's one of the biggest issues, is that if they make a coalition, it will work. If now there's an ability for the elections in Gaza to take place, the elections in the West Bank, they will choose Hamas, and then what will happen? You'll have a Hamas government in the West Bank.
Even closer to Israel's major cities.
In the heart of the land. It's literally like a heart in the middle of the land of Israel. And then what happened on 7th of October would happen not in Gaza, but will happen in places
Major
like
cities.
the West Bank. And so this is a great concern for everyone. The government is trying to find ways to get around this, but at the end of the day, how do you sway a population from following groups like Hamas? It's a very hard question. How do you do that?
Which goes to that intermediary that you're talking about. So if they select someone neither party is going to be happy with, but maybe some of the Arab League would be, okay, we're happy with an Arab leading this all together, and then
a so-called neutral player
Yeah.
That nobody finds 100% appealing, but both sides find something appealing in.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing is that you want someone who is not Jewish, not an Israeli government. You want someone who is not Israeli military. Israel does not want to have soldiers there. It doesn't want really to be in the military situation with Gaza. But Israel's there because we still have 20 hostages currently in Gaza. And we want them to come home. But also we want to live. We want to have a future. And in order to have a future, we got to take out the cancer.
And really not having all of southern Israel living under the cloud of another potential attack coming in from Gaza. And really that's one of the biggest areas in Israel that has the potential to grow in the future is the south of Israel, the Negev, Beersheba. They just announced a new international airport in Israel down there. So these are very close areas to Gaza. And you can expand your country in terms of in areas that you have some land to do so. If you're living under this cloud of a threat of Gaza, another attack, and missiles continuing to come in, so Israel has to eradicate Gaza, and I think that's what the world doesn't really fully understand, or if they do understand it, they look the other direction.
Yes, I think that getting rid of extreme Islam, we have no problem with Muslims. There are many Muslims, they're wonderful people, but extreme Islam is a problem. If we get rid of extreme Islam, then we're able to show people there's an alternative. There's another way to live. You can live with love, not with hate. And if people understand that what's in your heart, what's in your heart can be reality. If you want peace in your heart, live with peace with your neighbor, even if they're Jews or Arabs or whoever they are, then that can be a reality. So this big situation of what's going on in Gaza, we pray that the people in Gaza have had enough from Hamas. A lot of them have started chanting things and actually cheering for the IDF, which is, if you look at these videos, it's quite amazing.
The Israel Defense Forces.
The Israel Defense Forces, they see them and they cheer to them and they clap to them, not out of mocking them, but as saying, we know you're here.
To liberate
us. We know you're
us.
not going to kill us. We know that you're going to protect us. And this is really what they know. They know Israel is not the aggressor. They know this at this time, the people living in Gaza, but there's people that don't have a choice. And their situation is dire because of what's going on.
And if they felt that Israel was not going to get the job done or complete the job, then these Palestinians who don't like Hamas rule, who see what Hamas has done and have seen Hamas threaten Palestinians living in Gaza trying to get out of harm's way, and using them as human shields, and corrupting and taking the food that's coming in for themselves to enrich their own coffers, at the expense of the Palestinian people that they're supposed to be ruling over.
Yeah.
If those Palestinian people don't think Israel's going to come in and finish the job, then it's very difficult for them to be vocal about being outspoken against Hamas, because when Israel leaves, Hamas will kill them or their families.
Yes, and it's a very hard situation because what's happening now, the UN has given like stipends or kind of electronic credit to people to buy in the economy of Gaza, so that they have some money because they didn't have any economy. But what's happening, the aid has been taken away from the trucks, been sold in the markets, many of it Hamas marketplaces.
So just to clarify, Hamas is taking the aid.
Exactly. Hamas is taking the aid, and then they're bringing it to markets, and then they're selling it to people with the credits that they get from the UN. And that boosts their economy, and that means that they have now a living economy that is generated from world money, funds coming into Gaza. And so it's very hard to get rid of such a thing when suddenly people start seeing food on the shelves. They have money, they have food on the shelves, they have food in their stomachs, they're very happy, and not very happy, but they have what they need. So these things that look like they're going better for the people, yet Hamas is using it as a way to keep in control and rule.
That's exactly. So literally they are exercising control over the people through controlling the food coming in, the resources, and subjugating the civilians to continue to follow them despite the fact that they want freedom from the regime of Hamas.
And all the while they're doing it, they're creating propaganda to sway world opinion against Israel.
We hope you've enjoyed part 1 of Through the Eyes of an Israeli. We invite you to follow along as we keep the conversation going in part 2 in our next episode.
Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Zion's Wire, a podcast fueled by a passion for God, His people, and His plan for planet Earth. If you were encouraged by today's episode, share it with a friend and subscribe, or follow us on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Help us reach more people with the message of hope by leaving a 5-star review and download the Zion's Hope app for additional teachings and content. Keep the conversation going with questions or comments. Until next time, keep watching, keep praying, and keep your heart fixed on God's Word.